welcome to Jackson, and welcome. And I'm so happy you guys are doing this podcast, and hopefully what I intend to do today is just introduce everyone who watches this, who's interested in corrections, not just local, but on the state level, a little bit about what you all do. I was talking about the Inmate Disciplinary Oversight Board to quite a few people. And again, you're such a young agency, but you all have such a lengthy amount of experience related to doing this type of work or working in your communities. So I guess just give us a little description, whoever wants to go first, about what your agency does, and give me a little background on each one of you.
Okay, which, as you say, we're the Inmate Disciplinary Oversight Board. We were created by the legislature back in 2023 after the murder of Elijah Fletcher in Memphis, where an inmate was released early from the Department of Corrections because of good time that he had received. And after his release, and he killed Miss Fletcher. The board actually started on January the 1st of 2024. There are 9 members. The members are appointed by the governor, the lieutenant governor, and the Speaker of the House, and we have a member from each one of the grand divisions. I'm actually appointed by the governor's office. My name's Jerry Vastbinder, and I'm a former sheriff from Obion County, Tennessee. I retired in 2018 from the Sheriff's Department. And at this time, I'm actually the chairman of the Disciplinary Oversight Board, but our task is to review all Class A disciplinaries that occur in the 14 facilities across the state. And when we say Class A, we're talking about infractions or offenses that are serious, from a homicide to a rape to assault on officers to assault on offenders, indecent exposures, possessions of weapons, drugs. We review these, and they are reviewed by the 9 members. And right now we started out averaging about 1,700 or so incidents per month. And as we have been going through our process, we're down basically in the between 1,300 to, we've got as low as just right above 1,200. So we're slowly discouraging inmates from committing Class A infractions.
See, that's phenomenal. I mean, that's the kind of statistics you want to see. But also, for context, if people would ever wonder why I'm calling you Sheriff Vastbinder, I've known you since 2013.
Yes.
And we have a history of working together when you were the sheriff in Obion County. And I just want to say, I'll say Sheriff Vastbinder, because to me, you're always Sheriff Vastbinder. So I thank you for being here. And thank you for that. I do have a question, though.
Yes, sir.
Why is it just Class A's? I mean, because I know there's other infractions that can be or lead to serious thing. Why are they just kind of limiting you guys to just Class A's?
The legislature limited it to Class A's, and also refusal to participate in programs. Like if you refuse to work, refuse to participate in an educational program.
Gotcha.
But they went with Class A's because they're the more serious offenses, and there is good behavior time that can be taken away from the inmates. And over the years, the legislature for Tennessee actually passed the law, sentence management law, where inmates can occur 6 good days per month. And if they're really good inmates, they can get an additional bonus of 2 days. So that's 8 days for just good behavior. If they attend classes, any type of instructional program, they can also get 6 good days plus 2 bonus days. So they can get up to 16 good days per month. And that the good days are like dangling carrot that gets your release date where you can be released a little earlier. But it also is something where if you act up, that's something that can be taken away from you. So they concentrated just on the Class A's, but there are also B's and C's. And we look at some infractions for instance, an assault on a offender. It can be either an A or a B, and it's just like basically being out in the public on the street. You can have a misdemeanor assault or a felony assault.
Right, a shoving contest versus trading punches.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. No, that's interesting. I've learned just a lot in this first couple minutes, like a couple of little things that I did not know about you all. So that's great news. So we'll go to the next person and see what you have to.
Thank you for having me, Will.
Absolutely.
Appreciate
yes,
it.
sir.
I'm Lee Frank, and I'm from East Tennessee. I'm from the Clinton area. And I guess you would call me the layman of the group. I'm a small business owner. I was appointed by Lieutenant Governor McNally. He wanted me to put me on here to make sure to keep these other folks in check.
There's some ruffians on there for sure.
That's what I was. That's what I was put on for. I'm just kidding. I really, when he asked me to do this, I always thought that corrections is fascinating to me. It's I say this, and not just when I'm in front of corrections folks. I'll say this to average people. I can't think of a harder job in the world than working in a prison or jail. Usually bad PR. Media is not, you don't have a lot of glowing shows. It's not like television shows where doctors are heroes and cops are heroes. I mean, the people that actually have to take care of the prisons and the jails, it's just a horribly hard job. And we were brought in to, when I talked to the senator, he's lieutenant governor, when I talked to him, he said, here's what we want. We have in place a good time, which, like Jerry said, if you're really good, what is it, 16 days? Mm-hmm. So it's 46 days for every 30 you serve. To reward people, we're hoping that they become rehabilitated. They realize what they've done. They learn a trade. They learn skill, get their GED or degree or whatever. But the ones that are causing the problems that we want, they need to serve their full time, and that was not happening. You would have it. The Cleotis case, I guess he got, what did he get out, 4 years early?
Close to 4 years.
And the thought process is if he wouldn't have been out, he wouldn't have been able to be there to rape and kill that lady. And so if you're going to act the fool in prison, that you're going to serve your full time. And then it's up to the DAs and the court system if they need to add time to you while you're in there if you commit a worse enough offense.
And I don't think that's a controversial point for anyone across this state who's a law-abiding citizen. That's what's sometimes wild about it. You see these different people who are pushing for certain things to get people out, where all of us are about some prison reform or jail reform. But when we talk about those people who they don't need to go anywhere, sometimes that happens. People get released that shouldn't have been out because of lack of oversight or because of certain practices that happen. And I think you all have done amazing work on that thus far, just looking at the statistics and just, of course, I always follow you all when you speak in front of the legislature, and we end up in some hearings together sometimes. So yeah, I get that, but I just want to compliment that work and that mission. Yeah. You're obviously accomplishing in that mission.
I talked to the senator the other day, lieutenant governor. I keep calling him senator. He's both. And I said, as far as legislation, that what the legislature wanted was the inmates that are not behaving in prison, if they get out early, let's say if they've got a drug addiction or they're assaulting constantly, in the most confined environment, they're acting that way. What are they going to do when they hit the streets? And I said, for accomplishment, that between us and TDOC working with them, that the most violent inmates that don't seem to want to follow the rules and that are either drugs or knives or assaults or indecent exposure, things that are going to be detrimental when they get out, they're going to stay in there full time. And I think, and at least we keep them in. Hopefully they get saved, they get rehabilitated, something clicks in their life and if we've got to keep you in 3-4 extra years where you would be getting out normally, that's worth it. To me, public safety is the number one job that any government does. Well, if you're not, over anything else that government does is to protect the people that live in that
absolutely
community.
And if you're not doing anything about those that were getting out because you weren't taking time from the most violent of offenders who are, in custody and still, as a good friend of mine used to say, acting the monkey clown while you are incarcerated, then what incentive are you given to when you get out to the public to act right if you're not even being held accountable behind bars sometimes? And I'm not throwing shade at anyone by any stretch of the imagination, but sometimes those practices we've just always done it that way. So therefore we're going about it. And I think that's where you all provide an amazing service to the community and to the public and to the state.
Mike?
Well, Will, thanks for having us. My name's Mike Shearin, retired in 2022 from the Memphis Police Department after 27 years. I live just outside of Memphis in a suburb now. I was fortunate enough to be appointed to this board about 8 months, I think, after these two fine gentlemen, the OGs, as I call them. So I was appointed in August of 2024 by Speaker Sexton. Still kind of learning a little bit from these guys. I mean, they really, in Memphis Police, certainly we took people to jail, but we weren't over the jail. There's a consent decree that prevented us from running a jail by the time I got there. So the infamous 201 poplars where we used to take folks. But throughout my career in leadership and whatever else, never really dealt with these kinds of issues. So it's kind of been eye-opening to me to see what's going on in the state prisons. And then when you hear about folks like Sheriff Vastbinder that ran a jail for so long in a county near Memphis, just kind of eye-opening. All the challenges, the lack of accountability, not with his facility, but across TDOC, and holding inmates, convicted felons accountable for their actions. It's really been eye-opening, and I applaud the work of TDOC. Still have a long way to go in what they're doing, but the sheriff and some others on the board have been really working hard to have a working relationship with the folks at TDOC. Even though we're oversight, we still have to partner with them to get things done, just to get information. And his style of management, if you will, kill them with kindness, that kind of stuff has really made a difference, where, everything from the first matrix that I ever saw from TDOC that was really kind of a mess. And we would ask them, hey, how did you come up with this? And we couldn't get those answers. So he would gently nudge them until they finally got rid of that matrix and got one that makes more sense, that's easier for their folks to apply, that I think people like me and the layman here, Mr. Frank, believe puts a little bit more teeth in the policy as far as holding these folks accountable. So grateful for the opportunity to be here, thankful that you had us, and looking forward to continue the work that we're doing for the great state.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, kind of trying to encompass what you just put there. It's all about knocking down silos.
Right.
And so many institutions, I mean, in our state, including, nationwide, but in our state, you get in your silo and no one gets in. And
right. You have to protect
sometimes
it.
It is just about over time. And the larger the silo, the harder it is to, open up your doors and allow the grain to spill out. And let's find better, faster, more appropriate solutions. And I think you all have done an amazing job at breaking down a silo. Yes, sir.
I was going to say this. I was thinking about he was talking about the first matrix. And we talked to officer the other day at one of the prisons. How it started, the matrix before we came was, and it just goes to human nature, it was your first Class A offense. It was 0 to 9, Jerry? And then it was 0 to 12, and it was 0 to 15 for the third. And for anyone like
0
months,
who's a layman, let's throw that out there. What is the matrix? What did the matrix tell you?
Okay, if you had your first Class A, it would be 0 months to 9 months that they would take off of your good time. So you're staying 9 more months. If you had one, I guess if you had one and then you got your second, it was 0 to 12 months. And then 0 to 15 months for 3+. If you had 20, you have some inmates that have Class A's once a week. And so they've got 25 Class A. And I asked her, I said, would you say when it was the 0 and it was just the path of least resistance for the disciplinary boards, when you're looking at an inmate, it's a lot easier to take a 0 than it is to say you're going to stay in here an extra 12 months and you're face to face. I mean, it's just human nature that you're putting that out there to those folks. And when TDOC finally and when we first started, Jerry and I think Mike might have been in on those conversations, we were like, they're utilizing the 0 just because it's easier.
Yeah.
And they don't, they have to see these folks, and you've just taken 12 months from them, and you're like, is this going to be, there are going to be repercussions or this or that?
They didn't want the target painted on their back.
Right. I mean, it's just human nature. And so we said, you have to take the 0 out and take it out of the, now I think it's first offense is
3 months.
3 months.
No, 0. Well, yeah. So if they had no priors, 3.
And 1 is
9 to 12.
9 to 12. And then 12 to 15. And then 3+ is 15 to 18 months. And so there's some room in there, those 4 months, 15 to 18, you give them 16 or 15. But you take away the 0, and it takes, and I asked them, I said, does it take pressure off the disciplinary boards? And they're like, absolutely. Now, this is the matrix. You can boo-hoo and be angry about it, but you've been told this is a matrix, and so my hands are tied. If you've done this offense, you're going to lose the time. I think that's the very biggest thing they ever did was take the 0 out of the matrix.
Well, I mean, and that's the thing. There's not a 0 for certain things in society, right? You get pulled over and they draw your blood, and your blood is 0.13, you're going to jail. There is no 0 on that matrix. You're going to go to jail, and you're going to serve a minimum sentence. There is no, but to have 0, I'm kind of shocked, because I looked at the matrix, and we had communicated back and forth, and I was like, there's really a 0 on some of these things, and knowing that's an option.
And that was utilized 99.9% of the time.
Yeah.
But anyway.
So how do you think well, I want to go back a little bit in a sec, but how do you think the staff are reacting, and the administration and the local prisons are handling, and not just the disciplinary boards or the disciplinary personnel, but in general? What do you think? How do you think what you all have done and your process has it helped the local corrections officers or the state correctional officers?
Without a doubt, we have visited all the state facilities, the Tennessee and core civic facilities. The correctional officers say that it's definitely helping as far as controlling the inmate. The disciplinary hearing officers love it because it's set in stone that they've got a matrix, and they can tell the inmate, this is what you're going to lose. And actually, Department of Corrections has started a orientation. Is when you arrive at the Bledsoe facility, which is the reception center for the state of Tennessee, in your orientation, they go over that if you commit infractions while you're incarcerated in the Department of Corrections, and it's a Class A, you're going to lose time, and it's going to lengthen your stay. Because if there are people, for instance, that are doing a 10-year sentence at 30%, that once they've done 30%, they're eligible to be heard for parole or probation. Well, if they start acting and causing a Class A infraction, assault on another offender, or even assault on a staff member, and they're violated, then that moves their release date backwards. But we've had a really great working relationship with the Department of Corrections on working through this. One thing that helped before we ever even got completely started, is Commissioner Strada reevaluated a lot of the incidents and bumped them up to Class A's before we even started meeting. And then TOMAS, which is the Tennessee Offenders Management Information System, the computer system that the prisons use and all the county jails have it to put in inmate good times across the state. The TOMAS system, if you were written up for a Class A infraction and that infraction was not heard by the disciplinary board within 14 days, the TOMAS system was set where it vanished. It was dismissed. Well, when you had the bigger prisons, say your Whiteville, which is a TCA, or excuse me, a core civic prison, they would get a backlog, and a lot of these would just go off, so the incident was never heard. In working with Department of Corrections, we were able to get them. That has been ceased. There's no more deletions of any of the incidents. So all the facilities are having to hear their incidents, and it's making a big difference, because we're seeing, and for instance, Cleota Stapston that killed Miss Fletcher, under this new matrix, which he was back in the old matrix where there was 0 to 9, 0 to 12, 0 to 15. But under this new matrix, he would have flattened his sentence out. He would have done every day, day for day. So we're seeing that the officers across the state are liking it. And actually, we've even asked, is it causing you any problem with the offenders? Are the offenders wanting to backlash on you because they're losing more? And overall, most of them say, hey, I show them this is what you're going to lose. And they say, well, we understand.
Yeah, the inmates understand the new matrix and understand a little bit more about the board. But I think to answer your question, piggyback off what he said, we visited a couple prisons last week, and we asked them that, are we making a difference? Is the new matrix helping? What are you guys seeing? What trends? And I think both of the prisons said that the impact was positive. One of the folks even told us that, that the staff believes that TDOC and the disciplinary folks now have their back more, because the cases aren't automatically being dismissed after 14 days. I mean, he talked about that, but I think that's really huge, because we see things, as lay people or people that didn't work in jails. I know he was a sheriff, but as a former cop, we see things and just say, what do you mean they just go away? How does that make sense? Well, they have rights. Well, everyone has rights, but what do you mean? You continue it just like you do with a court case. Just like a police officer who has, a disciplinary issue. We didn't just say, you're the chief or the supervisor didn't hold this hearing in time, so it's just going to go away. No, that didn't make sense. So that's a huge win. But we're seeing, like he talked about, the numbers are going down. We certainly hope it's making a difference. We're going to keep looking at that, trying to analyze our data and the things we see. But as he said, we've visited all but one. We still have the Mark Luttrell Reception Center in Shelby County, but we have visited all those in the last year or so. And we'll continue to do that, because TDOC has been good about giving us access. It was a little slow in the beginning to the D-board sergeants, to people that are doing the work, but it's gotten much, much better in the last 6 months, year. And so we really glean a lot of information when we're able to meet with the wardens and the people doing the actual disciplinary work. And I think it's making a difference.
Well, and I'll tell you, I know a supervisor, and I'm just going to leave it there at one of the prisons in the state, and he reported that it has boosted morale of the officers, the fact that there is some accountability, and they don't believe anyone was intentionally trying to throw accountability away. It was just kind of how the process
worked. The way it
worked.
You said it's the way we've always done it, right? Well, it didn't make sense to just automatically do away with that at 14 days. Why do you do that? Well, that's the way we've always done it. Well, we kind of challenged them, and they answered the call. So.
I was going to say on that, I was sitting there thinking, for one, I always think about the rights situation. So I did this offense, and you're going to hear me and take my good time. But this guy's, you don't get to it for some reason, and it drops off. To me, you're treating inmates differently. It's totally unfair. But you're also, and I'm not making any accusations at all. I think these are hardest working people It's a hard job. But it also sets up for, do certain people, we didn't get to that case, whereas this guy, don't really care if we're gonna go ahead and see him, but this might be a big boss in the prison, and for some reason we never get to his. I mean, you could see that perception. If we do this, it could
cause these kind of problems.
You know what I'm saying? You could see the perception of that. So the 14 days, that besides the zeros, that was as Jerry said, that's probably the top two things that have been corrected that make this better.
And I'll just speak from experience. Sometimes just when you change something that will disrupt the inmate population and potentially have repercussions, it'll make you pause. However, doing things that are causing people to lose their lives or things like that, sometimes that's not bravery. And I'm not saying this in general. It's not bravery to keep it the way it is and maybe tweak a few things. The bravery is sometimes pulling the Band-Aid off, but being prepared for it and having frameworks set up to say, what is a better option? What is a better thing? And constantly thinking of ways to improve it. Like one of the things, I'm interested in, because I'll tell you, we have a lot of jails across the state, and we have a workshop the next couple of days to kind of talk about those things, who have become quite inventive in the way that they work through time management and the disciplinary process. Because, as you all know, county jail's not, Otis sitting behind there. You've got everyone from, I've said it on many a podcast or in front of groups. You've got everyone from grandma getting too drunk at the knitting club and getting pulled over for a DUI to Jeffrey Dahmer might be in the next cell. That's who your local jail, and they're serving more than 11 months and 29 days on many occasions there. But what I've noticed is because you have to balance those things. Pretrial inmates have no time. They're not earning time. I mean, until they go to court and are sentenced, and they may get some of that time. So I've seen creative ways to fashion those things so you don't go in as a pretrial inmate that you can't take anything from, but that having some weighing in the courts when those decisions are being made for sentencing. And for sentenced inmates, not only the taking of time for minor things, but there never being a zero. And I hope that makes sense. Like, there's never a zero. In other words, like there's been quite a few facilities, and I was lucky enough to work one of them. I was a disciplinary chair, where I had to oversee all of the disciplinary boards. And we came up with a way where it almost acted as a mini court. And what I mean by that is, like, for minor infractions, you come into jail and you happen to have, I'll just say, you happen to take a spork from dinner and stick it in your case, and you shouldn't have had the spork, even though we issue them to them to eat dinner with. We like throw them away at the end, and it's contraband. They've only been in there a week or two. Well, we would either suspend days. We would say, okay, we're going to sentence you to 3 days of lost time. However, we're going to suspend that, barring you potentially acting right, and then it'll fall off. Or taking those 3 days, and before the end of their time, they could request through good behavior, through participation in programs, and we would actually return some of that time. Are they taking initiatives? Or are you guys promoting initiatives like that? I know you're Class A's, I get it. That's something you don't, but as you peer into the Class B's, is it something like that you've looked at, to where it's kind of the carrot and the stick approach? Or I know we've kind of discussed it some, but has there been any things discussed about that?
We have discussed different ways of rewarding the inmates back some credit. The problem we have is when it comes to anything other than an A, right. The legislative intent was all we have authority over is the A's. But we have talked with TDOC, and TDOC has been working on making a lot of the A's where they're A's or B's. Like interference with an officer used to be strictly an A, where, inmate wouldn't let the officer do his job, right. or had a towel up over the window where you couldn't do your count right. And, that you'd have to write them up. Well, now the officers have got a little bit more leeway that they can either hit them with an A, or they can just do a B and not lose time. And as you say, then they have an improvised probation time that, as long as they're good, then, they're not going to lose any time, or even some verbals. So that has been discussed. But for us, we have no jurisdiction over anything other than the A.
Right. But
what I would like to say is when we talk about the amount of time taken away, which is a horrendous amount. If you've got someone that has got, say, 5 prior Class A's, and we go back 18 months, we use 18 months as the guidelines for how far we look at their priors. When you're losing 18 months, you can only gain 156 good days, and that's good days of good behavior, program work, and even 60 days of like getting your GED. So you can get 156 days maximum a year. It sounds like that we're just taking all these days away from a lot of inmates. Well, if you think about it, there's over 23,000 inmates in the Department of Corrections, and we're dealing with, and we don't have an exact percentile because some prisons have more gang-related inmates than others, so they have more problems than other prisons. But roughly out of the 23,000, we're somewhere in the 20% range of that's the ones that are causing the problems, because there are prisoners, inmates that go to prison. They go through, like, for instance, Turney Center. You can learn 27 different trades at Turney Center, and they can come out with HVAC certification, welding certification. So the whole idea of Department of Corrections is trying to reduce recidivism, and that's going through, but you do still have your troublemakers. And you've seen that from your past experience of running a county jail, that you have some people that just are going to cause problems, and some just, I want to do my time and go home.
The old can't get rights. I mean, you're just going to have them. And, we were talking about it in the sidebar earlier that, a lot of this either, acute intoxication through drugs or improvised alcohol and mental health is really a driver, a lot of those things inside of those institutions. However, I think, taking an approach at attacking those still doesn't excuse the behavior for because regardless, an inmate can be a victim to another inmate. I mean, and sometimes, and that's where you guys come in and provide that balance, which I do want to ask this question. If they don't believe, if an inmate, let's say you pulled 6 months time, right? Or that was the decision. Is there an appeal, like if, to appeal the decision, or do you guys investigate it? I know the answer to it, but I want to know a little more about it.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about our decisions if we take away time,
Or if the facility, like their disciplinary board.
Well, they would appeal that to the warden. We would have nothing to do with that. But if they appeal our decision, they're given a form, they're given paperwork that says that, this was reviewed on such date, signed by our chairman, our executive director, and then they can file an appeal. They have a certain 2 weeks, I think, is the deadline to turn that in. And then we have an appeal committee that will convene every, a couple times every month to look those over. It's rare that an appeal is granted. The appeal board is right here. All three of us make up that appeal board. So I kind of chair that for the chairman. But we look at it. We all three review it separately, and then we come together virtually to discuss it. It is rare, but there have been times when we have granted appeals. But we take we look at them, we weigh whatever their appeal is, if there are any merits to it or not, and then we, as a board, decide.
Are you able to request like investigatory material, like if there was a video of the incident or anything? Are you all able to?
We don't get video yet, but we can get anything. A lot of times the inmates as part of their appeal will send us some of that paperwork. But if we've had a couple times, I think we've asked for some more information from TDOC before we've made our decision on an appeal. But generally, we have all of that stuff that we need through access to eTomas. We can read through the case and see what's going on. But no, video is something we don't have access to at this point.
I was going to say, I was just sitting there, for the folks watching this, when I first got on the board, I did a little research on it. Good time was originally, and I think some states like Texas does not even give good time. But Tennessee, we're about in the middle as far as the states go, as far as how much good time you can earn. But it was originally started for inmates that were, if you go back to the very beginning of it, that were doing a Bible study or being in charge of the garden or whatever they were doing. Now it's just not, if you go to class, you get the extra time, but you can get good time by just not causing problems. You see what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
Good time was originally for you going above and beyond what a normal inmate did. You were a leader. You did this or that, and it's kind of evolved into. And I guess Jerry and I talk about this quite a bit. There have been court cases that, what is it, Wolf
versus McDonald.
Because this has been challenged before because it's and Jerry, you want to go over a little bit more about that, it's the civil procedure, but, and if you want to piggyback, you're more than welcome, of course. But once you open the door, a state opens the door to good time, then there are certain rights that the inmate has, due process and different things like that. Jerry, you got anything on that?
Yeah, which Wolf versus McDonald was a Supreme Court case over good time and losing good time. And y'all at TCI teach that in your training. But, overall, our process is a civil action. So we're just looking to basically tilt the scale. We're not a judge and jury, so we're not going beyond reasonable doubt. But the courts have said that they have so much time to actually have the hearing that they can have witnesses if they want to, or even an inmate can just waive all that. If an inmate waives his right for the appeal or for a hearing, then he waives his right for an appeal. He, instead of having to have 3 people on the D board listen to it, the D board chairman can go by the matrix and just issue, if he was supposed to be in the 9 through the 12 range, if the person pled guilty, the disciplinary hearing officer may go with the lower end of the range and just do the 9 months on it. But we look at all of that, and we even, as Mike said, we have a date line that you're supposed to file on appeals. We found out where now Department of Corrections, all of your mail now is being scanned and going into a tablet. We mail out all of our appeals records if we take time away from an inmate. Well, it was being scanned into the tablet. Well, with the tablet, they couldn't file the appeal because they've got a copy of it there, but they can't do anything. So TDOC was able to change that pretty quickly and put the appeal forms in the library. So we've been given leeway. We've been going 30 days or so. If they send in a appeal, we've looked at it, and as Mike says, we've granted some back, and then a lot of them we uphold it, and some of them are just, we get letters basically just saying,
they're lying on me.
Yeah.
Do
a lot of jailhouse or lawyers in these prisons, it appears, because some of them like to talk to us about due process and everything.
I was not aware of what you were talking about as far as the tablet. Does that have to do with the drugs coming in the mail?
Yes.
And just for the folks out there, drugs coming into prisons is like a national pastime for inmates and many of their families, it seems like, and people, however they get there, because it's just, you close this and then this is used. They're using drones now to fly drugs over and drop them off. And anyway, I guess that's what that's for, is they use
fentanyl on actual paper has been the biggest. I mean, we've had officers and even local jails that have had overdoses and had to be Narcaned from touching items coming through the mail. And you'll have people argue. I mean, why are you arguing? It's like arguing for voter ID. why are we even having this argument? I mean, we know of cases where people are getting overdosed. Why, but you see a lot of, I mean, I'm not trying to argue one way or another on that, but to me, it's just common sense that if they're getting drugs in, I mean, we had Suboxone coming in before that, and
Ecstasy.
and male ecstasy, or, I mean, acid-soaked letters, and where it's basically a hallucinogen. It's and it's happened over the years, and then finally, after enough, I mean, when things were killing people on contact, the fentanyl thing kind of brought it to the table, and we've seen a lot of jails do the same, where it's all going e-content, and they scan it and they put it in, with the exception of some things that require a legal process. They will mail, they'll accept those things, but it's a shame that you have to have, basically wear rubber gloves just to check a piece of mail, because people choose to try to circumvent the system. And it's a concern, but I'll tell you what the industry, and I'm not speaking just about prison, but the jails, we've always done a poor job of being proactive. Really because of what we talked about at first, or what you all were talking about at first, that we're people who work behind the bars are the least out in the public, and they're the worst at bragging about themselves. I mean, just the correctional industry in general. But we're also the worst at not being innovative and thinking of ways that we can approach these things, and really being our own champion to say, look, we could solve a lot of these things through innovation and through new ways of doing things. And but you still have the people who are like, well, we've always done it that way.
Right.
And we experience it with all, 95 counties at some point. Doesn't matter if you have the greatest thing since a pocket on a shirt, somebody is not going to like that.
Right.
There's going to be one.
We had talking about, I saw an article, and Georgia's trying to stop cell phones, which is another big issue. And people, I'm sure, are going, what are they doing with cell phones? And it's fascinating. And there's a market for cell phones. If there's a serious crackdown, I think sometimes the cell phones will bring in, like, was it $3,000-$4,000?
$6,000, I think we've been told.
And if there's a glut, then it's down. It's
supply and demand, right?
A prison is like its own little city, and so they have markets moving. And what they were trying to do in Georgia, it seems like just common sense. When you get involved in this, you start looking at this, and maybe it's just because it's always been done this way. You'll have like major players that will use the cell phone to run their drug empire outside, and so they need a cell phone. They don't need, you're not going to use the prison phone. I mean, you can call your wife on the prison phone, your kids, or whoever you're talking to, but those are being recorded. So they want something that's what a cell phone in a prison's for.
Oh yeah,
is to do things. That. And what they were trying to and for other things, but what they were trying to do was to stop cell phone service around the prison. And I think we talked about it, Jerry. Didn't you tell me, like, the FCC and it's just common sense. You've got a cell phone problem. If you make it where cell phones don't work, then that market goes away. They can't use cell phones, and I might ask you about it, because sometimes I think the officers will say, then my cell phone doesn't work. I mean, is there technology? I'm thinking there should be technology, maybe there is, where you have to have your cell phone typed in and it'll work, but a cell phone that's not recognized, that number's not recognized, it won't work. But it seems like simple solutions like that.
There's technology, then there's ways to do it, but there's also loading up cannons to shoot gnats. Is kind of the way I approach these things. Okay. And like I watched, have you all seen the Alabama Solution? It's a Netflix documentary.
No, but I've heard about it.
And the thing that is astonishing to me is the number of cell phones that people are communicating with. I mean, whether bad, good, I don't have an opinion one way or another on this, but the astonishing amount of phones that they were using to communicate. It just tells me, have we gone back to doing what we need to do as corrections professionals? And being a practitioner myself, where has the culture gone wrong that this is happening? Because they're not, in a jail, they come in multiple ways, right? But usually in a prison system, these people aren't leaving the compound. And while, jails get them the same way that they do, but where have we gone back to basics? Are we going to technology our way out of that? Or have we gone to our basics and then look at what type of technology we need to prevent those? Because that's really, we're talking about disrupting service. What happens if grandma's having a heart attack in the parking lot? I mean, I'm not against it. Trust me. If we can disrupt that and we ruin that, but I think we have to get back to, we ruin the market, right? We get rid of that market. If you're paying $2,000 or $3,000 for a cell phone, but why don't we hold people accountable? Why aren't more officers being charged with a crime when they catch them for introduction? Why aren't, I've got an opinion on that. I know I've seen a lot of DAs that refuse to prosecute.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And
I understand.
And that's frustrating.
I understand your point, but they are coming in, and you're sitting there going, all right, this is a Class A. This is one of our Class A's, so it's a big deal because used for all kinds of different nefarious reasons to have that cell phone and not using. And grandma in the parking lot, I understand that, but I'm thinking, if a cell phone can go for $5,000, that's a monetary incentive for somebody to bring that cell phone to those people.
That's right, and I'm with you for.
You're trying to think. Then what do we do?
Well, if you cut the service off, I think that's a good thing. I do, and maybe a solution to that is, I'm gonna be frank with you. There's a lot of jails in this state. You cannot walk in a jail with that cell phone, and thinking that, there's some you can, but no one should be able to walk in with a cell phone, employees included in many occasions, or it's kept in a certain area and it's monitored. You go to Shelby County, everybody's going through a body scanner, the employees included, before they walk into 201 Poplar. They're being scanned, everything's being x-rayed, but it still gets in. I'm not speaking specifically to one Poplar. It's any jail across, because when you're talking about people who place it in their body cavity, and we've tried to technology our way out of that, and it's still getting in. Meaning that we have body scanners that look at internally and flag things, but it's still getting in. I think disrupting the market like that would be a great idea, is what I'm saying, and we could figure out what are the negatives, and we have to think about those solutions before we put a call phone out in the parking lot. And we have call stations for officers who are working. Give your family members this number. Because I remember this same discussion, and because some people are like, well, what if my family has an emergency? It just doesn't work anymore because people are younger. But I remember when cell phones in the early 2000s were first introduced, they were like, well, I've got a cell phone. Well, how will my family get in touch with me? I was like, how'd they get in touch with you before that? I was like, you give them the work number, we can pass a message. If it's an emergency, we'll come running.
Right.
I know, it's hard enough to get people to work there at times in the prisons too.
I understand, and maybe that's what it's about. You're like,
but if people are losing their lives and drugs are being trafficked in, we there's a combination there. Let's use technology and get some things done, but also let's get back to why are we here? Why we shouldn't accept that cell phones are getting in.
Still come in, right?
Right. We shouldn't accept. Honestly, if DAs are not going to prosecute, then some laws need to be changed where maybe the Attorney General's office could send somebody out.
And we've been talking about that exact thing about some other cases
really?
too. Yep.
That's fantastic because I know
because you hear all the prisons. Most of them generally are going to know their DA and speak highly of them, and then there's several where they're like, we can't get them to do anything, and if they do, it's not concurrent. It's consecutive. It's concurrent, not consecutive.
Yeah, which does nothing.
Which is slap on the wrist. You waste everybody's time.
I think that's a good point. Bringing that up for the listeners out there, the viewers out there. I was just going to say real quickly, what if a person's serving 10 years and is misbehaving horribly and hurting people and bringing in drugs and dealing drugs and everything like that, he will serve 10 years, but that's all he can serve by what we can do. What it takes is, as we were talking about, the DAs and the criminal court judges, they have to be brought up on other charges, and then the DA, the system in where the prison lies has to. That's how you keep folks at. Absolutely, and I think that's what we're all talking about. That's how you really keep your violent people in prison, is you stack charges on them, and they just keep adding charges, and then you just won't leave if you're never going to behave.
Well, and it stops the control over others. I mean, when you really think about that, because the 20 worst percentage of that prison will all of a sudden look like 5%,
right?
Because you have those puppet masters.
To get the message, yeah.
That are controlling these others, and those others sometimes don't want to. I mean, I know this from experience from working inside the walls. They're doing it because they feel like they have to. Because if they don't, they're more worried about the consequences of what's going to happen inside.
Right.
And so therefore, if you're cutting the head off the snake, and you get in there and you physically assault someone or stab someone, and you're getting an attempted murder charge that's run consecutive and not concurrent, that changes the atmosphere just a little bit, especially for those patsies, the ones who are doing the, it's the old adage when I remember walking into a unit and you'd find the loudest person in the room. Everyone wants to point to that person. That's the ringleader. No, it's not. It's the guy sitting on the bunk who's calling orders, and they're the quietest one in here. And you just have to figure out who that person is. And then, and it's figuratively cutting the head off the snake, but you don't play around with those people, and they're controlling. I would bet out of that 20% that you would cut that down to 5% if there were some real consequences to people who are committing crimes. We're not talking about, they didn't play nice on the basketball court, who are committing crimes in prison or committing crimes in jails. I mean, honestly, they need to be need to have their day in court just like they would if they were out on the street. And it doesn't need to be involved in that, knowing that if you commit a serious crime in prison and or jail, that you're adding to it. There is no, I'm going to run it, concurrent with this time. That would change a lot of attitudes.
That's we're actually looking at introducing some legislation in the next term that would start running any crime committed in a correctional facility, whether it's state or county, if it's committed while you're incarcerated, that it would be run consecutive. But, Will, from your years of dealing with the county jails, county jails are so much more controlled, because if you find a cell phone on an inmate in the county jail, you're usually going to have, your DA is going to prosecute him for possession of.
Oh, yeah. In general, yes, sir. But we have the same problem with jails, not as widespread, but exactly.
Right. We, in Obion County, we were lucky if I had somebody that we caught with a cell phone, contraband in a correctional facility. If I had someone throw urine or feces on a correctional officer, that's assault on an officer, which is a Class C felony. Assault, if two inmates or even a inmate assaulted an officer and had serious injury to, black eye or something, we could prosecute it. In the Department of Corrections, they have so many inmates, the DAs just kind of pick and choose the cases that they want to take because they think, well, they're in prison anyway.
Yep. I've heard that from a DA, not when I was with the county, but just talking to different DAs. I'm definitely not naming who it was, but they're like, why are they sending this contraband introduction for charges? Well, it's a cell phone coming into. Why am I going to spend? And I understand, why am I spending taxpayer resources on convicting this person? Well, this isn't the first one. This is just the first criminal offense really criminal offense that we've run into. But it happens, and I think that should be in play. It should be in play that they're incarcerated for violent crimes, and if they do something violent and or Class A, there should be consequences, and it should run consecutive. I think it would provide it helps the public sleep easier, knowing that, because I've heard this before too. Well, they just stole Jimmy's lawnmower. Why, let's just do a zero bond and and we'll just release them. They won't, they'll go in, pay a fine. I get it. They're on drugs and they want to sell that and pawn it. But guess what? Did anybody bring Jimmy his lawnmower back, or is it repaired, or, he got broken into, now he's got to fix his lock and he feels victimized. There's components to all of that. Yeah, I get the small
How many
crime.
other crimes did he commit that he was never charged with or caught?
Right. And we're not teetotalers here. We want you to get in there and really reform your life and get sober and get God and get the things that, learn a trade, do something to be productive in your life. But if you can't even act right there and you can't do those things, then what business do you have? I mean, and the thing is that's with all due process followed.
That's just a couple of quick points. I was thinking about the DA, and there was legislation that was brought. I thought it was great legislation. I think the DAs, it was not us, but it was the DAs, because you only have certain, how many, I don't know whether 33 districts that a DA, because some counties there might be 5 counties with one DA and one criminal court.
Yeah, 6 districts that have district attorneys and prisons.
That a DA, so you can't have, we don't have time, we're doing this. A DA that's being funded by the state that would be solely responsible for prison prosecution, and people might go, well, what if there's nothing? And then and this was my idea, I thought, I was talking to a legislator about it, and if there was no prosecution on the horizon, then the DA could use that for things in his office. So it wouldn't be the guys working one day a month and then at the golf course.
Well,
you see what I'm saying?
That can also help with jail prosecutions as well, because that's, we run into that in certain, I'm not trying to dog on DAs, but I understand that some of them have caseloads, or some of them have political, things that they lean politically towards and choose not to do those things. But that's neither here nor there. It's not helping the victims of these crimes or the people who work behind the bars or the victim that's in jail. And picking and choosing those things is not conducive to great public safety. And that's unfortunate. But I do think that's a wonderful idea that, because the jails would need someone like that, especially, I would say, somebody who worked the prisons, and someone in targeted districts where nothing is getting, where the sheriff would come to the state and go, I can't get my DA to prosecute any of this crime. I had an officer assaulted and I can't get him to prosecute. I think that would be helpful. I mean, it would take legislation, because we all know jurisdictional control over those things. But I would tell you, I can't speak for the 95 sheriffs out there, but it is a complaint that I hear from them pretty consistently. And the same thing with officers and bad actors. Sometimes you catch that person who comes in with the cell phone, and they catch that person and they're like, just fire them. And there's in the correctional world, until July 1 of this year, there was no recourse. If they fired them, they could go over to the next county and get a job. Well, we got the law changed this year through sponsorship through Representative Lamberth, who really championed that and said, look, the post, you can do that. You can bring them in front and remove that certification from the post commission. But local correctional officers, there was nothing. They could fire them unless somebody did a deep down background investigation check, where these sheriffs have gone forward and said, I want to charge this officer. I mean, it might have been something like for stealing that belt from, that duty belt that wasn't theirs out of there. I want to charge them for it. They need to know they can't do that. Something, I know that sounds petty, but if they want to charge them, they should. They committed a crime. And we shouldn't be picking and choosing, but there wasn't an outlet. That officer could go to the next county over. But now, starting July 1, the process will be set up to where those people can be decertified and they can lose their certification in state and never work in the state again, which was needed. But it's the same thing on both sides, so people are like, oh, just going after people for committing crimes. And what if it's wrong? Well, for the people who are watching, there's investigations that go into these things. There's evidence presented. There's appeals provided. There's things, that go into these things where you actually probably give more due process than actually required, but it's intentional to show, okay, I'm just not slapping something on you. There's multiple hands. There's no judge, jury, and executioner. It's a multi-step process. So these things aren't just, contrived in a back room and we're just going to decide to hold Billy Bob here for an extra year. But also when it comes to prosecuting these crimes, it shouldn't be weighted. If the administration says this person needs to be charged with a crime, and you get your local sheriff or your local police department to come out and file the police report and send those charges in, when you're talking about someone who's in there for a crime, you should be able to prosecute if you review the evidence. It shouldn't be left up to prosecutorial discretion at that point. Because if you have definitive evidence that it's happened, now granted, they may not be convicted, but it's still one of those things that you're not giving the victims due process in this point. I mean, and that's where our world's gotten messed up, that you're not giving whoever that victim is a voice in the matter.
Right. And we actually get a quarterly report from the Department of Corrections on how many cases are referred to district attorneys from the prisons. And being a young board, like as you said, we're the youngest, I guess, in the state, we haven't had a chance yet to be able to put a ratio on how many cases are actually getting prosecuted that are sent over. But it's averaging between 400 and 500 cases per quarter out of all the 14 prisons that are being referred to district attorneys. And we do see where some of them are being prosecuted. We see it, indecent exposures. You've got people that constantly are exposing themselves in the prison, and a lot of the district attorneys are prosecuting them and running them consecutive. We have some that's running them concurrent. But the state law, if you've been convicted of indecent exposure for 3 times, you're on the sexual register for the rest of your life too. A lot of the inmates don't understand that.
Why does it take 3 times? That's all I'm asking.
Exactly.
Why does it take 3 times?
Oh, that's one of those laws we didn't write.
Yeah, I understand.
Right.
I understand.
But we're looking at all that and trying to come up with different ideas to make the correctional system safer. I feel like for what the legislature has requested as far as taking the violent offenders and making sure that they have to serve every day of their sentence, we're on top of that. We are not going. I can say that the Inmate Disciplinary Oversight Board is not going to let an offender out early. We look at the time that they have occurred on good time. We look at the time that's been taken away from them, and the majority of them, if they have acted up, they're going to flatten their sentence. And nowadays with the truth in sentencing, if you've got the 100% sentence or the 85% sentence, if it's 20% or 20 years at 100%, you're going to do 20 years. The court says you're going to get out after 20 years. So we see a lot of those people acting up because
they don't have anything to
they
lose.
don't have anything to lose. But
prosecuting any crimes they commit, that
Right.
can very
Additional
well.
time.
keep
Right.
them longer.
Right.
That's right.
I think it's important, we talk about the impact, and you guys, the OGs, tell me if I'm wrong, but I think in 2022, we were told that TDOC took about 2,000 days, which would be about a little over 5 years of good credit time as far as disciplinary, when they were doing disciplinary infractions. As a board in 2025, we took away over 1,000 years, just the board, not even TDOC. So the impact, what the legislature wants us to do, taking away those good credit times so those folks aren't getting out that are behaving badly, right? We're not talking about the people that are just trying to get by. We're talking about the guys that are selling dope, using drugs, stabbing people, assaulting, corrections officers or others. So
Yeah, serious infractions
Right.
that many can be charged
right.
with crimes.
And they weren't being charged,
Right.
4 years ago, and they are being now. So it's definitely making an impact. We're making an impact.
What do you all see for the future? What would you like to see happen, both with the board and what kind of things would, look, we're one of your partners. We're just local jails, and we're all across the state and we do a lot, but because I would like to see more collaboration between time management, between the state sentenced and the locals, to getting a little more on the same page. But I know that's what I would like to see. But what do you all see for the Disciplinary Oversight Board?
Well, you actually have taken the words out of my mouth, and that's what our workshop tomorrow is going to be. Is the IDOB board wants to work with TCI and establish a criteria where the county jails that are holding TDOC inmates will be held at the same standard as if they were in prison, because eventually, if you've got somebody, and we'll pull the Shelby County Jail since they're such a big one, you've got someone doing a 10-year sentence at Shelby County, they may spend 3 or 4 years before there is even a bed, or they may spend the whole 10 years in Shelby County before they can get in. But if they've committed Class A's there, and say they've committed 5 or 6 Class A's, and then all of a sudden they are transferred to one of the state facilities, with those 5 or 6 Class A's were never handled in the county jail, then that's just free time that they got in the state jail. So I think that the unity of our two agencies working together to ensure uniform disciplinaries across the state is one of my biggest priorities.
Absolutely, because from the locals' perspective, for years, like either you could get nothing done through Thomas or everything done through Thomas, and let's say somebody had they had a pushing and shoving charge. We'll just call it that, and you put it to Thomas back in the day, and it's been many, many years ago. That inmate lost 30 good time days, and we're like, whoa, our local sentence was only 7 days, and that's been added. But why are we having to keep this individual longer when they've cleaned up their act? There's been no problem since. There's no reason to think it. But then in the other sense too, they'd put something into Thomas and nothing had happened with it. And they're going, why haven't you released this individual? And I'm not saying it's TDOC's fault. That's just kind of the way it was.
Miscommunication.
So in jails, a lot of times, to our own fault, we weren't putting things in Thomas.
Sure.
We're just like, look,
it wasn't worth it.
We'll ride it until they tell us what to do, and then we'll report it if they act out. And not saying that was intentional by design, but that's just the way some agencies operated. And I think there has to be some continuity, which actually could help the local disciplinary process to say once they implement even a minor sentence and they're a TDOC state inmate, that you could place that infraction inside of Thomas and that there's a level of agreement. And I think that's where you all might be able to provide the bridge additionally. And that's why I asked the lower infraction thing, because a lot of lower infractions happen on the local level from TDOC inmates, but that back and forth, what's that going to, a sheriff is going to argue with the Department of Correction, where we're going to get nowhere. It was either TCI do the deliberation, which we've worked through those things, but you guys are set up perfect for something like that, to be that bridge. And I see it working in the future if that's a possibility. And so I'll implore all the legislature, give you guys the resources you need, because I think there's things that could really promote public safety, but also prevent those people who are stuck waiting behind walls, who've done everything they had to do, waiting on some bean counter to finish up this time calculation when everything could have happened more modern and in real time. Because I see that happen a lot too.
Oh, right now, the way the sentence management team works at TDOC, if you're in a county jail and let's say you're transferred to the Department of Corrections, the county jail has to make basically a packet, a copy of all of your information, your disciplinaries, all of that. And if you've still got several years before your release date, it goes to sentence management and it ends up in a big box. They've got just boxes and boxes because they're still working on paper copies. They've just now started scanning in the information from the Department of Corrections, like Northwest Prison, West Tennessee, Whiteville, all those. They're starting to actually live scan in some of their stuff. And the new Thomas system that's coming out this fall will have everything live scanned. But the sentence management people, until you hit 120 days prior to your release, may not even look at your packet, and then they get a notification, hey, this person's going to be released in 120 days. They've got to go through that paperwork and double check and make sure that they are eligible for release. So we've been up there at sentence management and actually gone through the whole process, and they'll have bankers boxes just full of backlog papers. But the commissioners has done made changes. They've hired about 10 new people. The legislature gave them money to hire some people, and they're actually going through it faster. But it was nothing to see a disciplinary that had been held 3 years ago still pending being taken out of Thomas.
Wow.
Because they were still, everything is paper.
Well, most records management systems and jail management systems that in local jails, it's almost a real-time action from incident report to converting it to doing time calculations. There are records management systems that have built-in logarithms specifically for those time calculations, and it's real-time notifications and time changing inside of the system. Even like for the taking and sometimes providing back of time with all the justifications, and everything is time stamped. And I just don't understand why we lived in that world too long, and now no one wants to let go of it.
It's getting better, but they've still got a long way to go. And it's frustrating for us, is just like you said, this day and age, how in the heck are we still so antiquated? How are they so antiquated?
The new Thomas will be real time.
Fantastic.
The old Thomas basically is a dinosaur. The way the STS state technology people tell us, there's only about 2 people left in Nashville that even know how to work on Thomas. It's such an old, outdated system.
It's originally DOS-based, wasn't it?
It was, and actually, believe it or not, you're old enough that you remember the old green screen Thomas.
Oh, yeah.
The girls in sentence management.
With the flash and underscore.
Yeah, that's what they actually put the information in, is in green screen. They don't even get to use the e-Thomas. Everything goes in green screen.
So that's the old DOS system, the old Thomas. Mm-hmm. That's interesting.
Yeah, but the new Thomas will be up and working before the first year, and like we were told Tuesday, Tuesday we're at Bledsoe. Bledsoe will be the first facility to test it.
Well, the good news is they've already coordinated with us, and props TDOC sending people to our conference and saying, look, let's coordinate because we want to help the local jails get on board, input data and things like that. It does. I hate that the local jails really didn't have any input on like what could be user friendly on our end to help expedite their process, but I get it. And, but it's not an uncommon thing amongst when I first came to TCI, and we're not talking about 25 years ago. We're talking 2013. Everything we did was still on paper and cards. Like there wasn't, besides email and somebody maybe sending a spreadsheet every now and again, our training was being reported in Word documents that were printed and mailed to us, and then we'd have to fill out a handwritten card to say if they had their in-service or basic training or new cards for that. That's why they brought me in to modernize it, because I was like, wait a second, we haven't done this since I've been in this industry and since the 90s. I was like, why are we doing this? And to show you where some of those things, the technology has really helped us bridge quite a few gaps, and maybe our collaboration can help give them some ideas and maybe help us work with Thomas to give you guys a bridge. And then, because I think that's a lot of the answer, not just to collaborate with the local jails, but to have access to that information in the real time for those state sentenced inmates as it's coming through, to be able to go, hey, let me look at this and make certain that what we're doing. And if someone doesn't like what the other's doing, you guys are the mediator, so to speak.
And also what they've told us in the new Thomas system, the inmates on their tablets will have real time on when their release date is. And if they commit infractions, they will also see real time how much they extended their release date too.
Now, we used to call it like a green date, yellow date, red date.
Yeah.
And but yeah, if they could, that helps them. And I think somehow one of those minor infractions, if there's a carrot out there going, if I act right, I could potentially move that green date up. And that might be helpful too. But I know we'll discuss that over the next few days.
Yeah.
What would you all like to see, though? Like, say, 5 years from now?
Quicker turnaround from TDOC on stuff we're having to deal with, questions. I mean, like I've said, they've gotten much, much better, but still a long way to go. I mean, for them to be truly modernized in their processes and us to have access to everything we need. I mean, it's gotten better, but, and I think, you know, in a year or two, they could be there. You know, certainly the new Thomas, the new database will be, you know, a huge step in the right direction. I mean, you're talking about how you used to use it a million years ago, and imagine that they're still using that.
That's wild.
30 years almost later. So, but sorry, I cut you off there, Mr. Frank.
No. I was just kind of pondering it myself. I mean, dealing with the local jails, and just I was set in on a D board. My thing, I guess my wife calls me the ref. It's always been about fair and equitable is how I see things. If you're a state inmate and I've talked to somebody the other day, it might have been you, Jerry, that said a lot of inmates that are like felons that they would prefer going to prison and not always in the jail, or is it which I would always think it would be a lot safer to be in a jail than in a prison.
That's a common misnomer. No, there's just, I mean, based on your county resources, you don't have access to the things. I mean, and that's the truth, because besides the money they're getting paid for the state inmates, which isn't usually enough to cover the cost of that inmate being there. I'm really not trying to get that, you know, because I know the legislature battles that all year
right,
or all the time. But, you know, when you're talking about that, they don't have the resources to provide the welding class, or they can't build the building to have the welding class, even though the welding class could be free. You see what I'm saying?
When I was told that, like I said, as a layman, and you learn things. I mean, I love to learn. This is fascinating to me. I bet if you asked the general public, 95% of the people would say, well, you want to stay in that local jail because they think of Barney Fife and Otis. And you think of the big house is Oz and just really violent, and well, I don't want to go into that. You know, I guess because people, you know, aren't in that life. And you're saying that people, and I bet you people out there listening are going, I can't believe that. But some would like to go to like Bledsoe or Morgan County more than staying in Morgan County jail.
And it's a factor of some things. Some of them can be negative, you know, based on overcrowding and things like that. But in general, it's usually because corrections officers are well trained and they feel like they're being watched, and there's not any. Sure, there might be privileges, but there's not many, and so there's no freedom to do the things that or comfort of life, make life comfortable, or creature comforts that you potentially could get in prison.
Right.
Because when we look at building jails, and that's one of the things we do, is like, we review plans, we look at things, and I've told architects this, and any architect working in the state of Tennessee and engineering firm that pitches jails to people, I'll be the first to tell you I'm told them this, but they want to give all these bells and whistles, but counties can't afford that. And so while they do need a training room, or they do need a place to do prison industries in a local jail, that's just going to have to be cut out the budget because the beds are too expensive. And so what ends up happening is your physical plant is going to determine how you operate that facility. And many times it's how can you staff that facility? So the least creature comforts you can receive in a local jail, usually the cheaper it is to run. But it also causes some bad behavior, but that just means, because there's no carrot stick sometimes, but that's why people hate serving time in a local jail. There's no fun in it.
I'll finish up because I went and then I had a sidebar and got into where would you rather be, a jail or a prison?
Neither.
But going back to
federal prison, that's where I would like to go.
Me being the ref. Okay, me being the ref. If you're a state inmate, the guy here is losing 12 to 15 months. If you're doing the same thing, and it needs to be equitable.
100%.
If you should not be getting just having your commissary taken or your TV privileges or however, and you've got 95 different jails, and I think everybody, and correct me if I'm wrong, some people do things differently here, there, and everywhere, maybe?
Oh, yeah.
Whereas if you do that, you need to be, if you are a state inmate, not a county inmate, but a state inmate, you need to be taken and punished the same way that you would if you were in a prison.
That's correct.
Just as is a constitutional fairness issue, if you're a state inmate, it shouldn't matter where you are, it should be the same.
I don't disagree with that at all. I mean, that's the crux of the matter, and but I also think that minor infractions should be similar. I don't think you should get 0 for anything if you're convicted of a minor infraction. I mean, it could be just suspended days, like act a fool again, and you'll have 3 days plus whatever else you do added on. Even something like that needs to happen for those state sentenced inmates, as well as because that's the format that many use in local jails. There's no 0 for anything. There's some maybe warnings, right, for very minor infractions, but once you step over that, there's consequences. Yep.
Right.
One of the sad things I've seen in the 34 years that I've dealt with the sheriff's department and 16 years as sheriff is you have some inmates that come from poverty-stricken families, and they will commit a crime, and it's not a violent crime. It will be a simple theft. Matter of fact, I can think of one person that ended up going to prison for stealing some pies out of a window. He had just got out of prison and stole some pies, got 10 more years on it. And I was talking to him, perfect inmate while he would be in the county jail. And I asked him, I said, why do you keep doing it? Because when we would put him like working, buffing floors, whatever, he would work his tail off. And he told me one day, he said, Sheriff, he said, I'd rather be in the institution. I know that I have breakfast in the morning, lunch at noon, and supper at night. I have medical. I'm going to stay warm or cool. He said, I have nothing in the real world. If I'm out, I'm having to sleep under a cardboard box. I don't have a house. So we do have a lot of people that just become institutionalized.
Yep.
But on your question for the future that I see on our board, and as an ex-sheriff, I'm very fiscally minded. I always was tight with the tax.
You're the first person I bring up with knowing where every penny is. I promise you.
But I see our board continuing to do the work that we're doing. I think that broadening our scope, working with your organization, TCI, and working with the counties, that we can get uniform. Our board has been very fiscally minded. We have not gone over any budget. We actually turn in extra money each year. A lot of people say, well, you're keeping these people incarcerated longer, so there is a fiscal note on that. Well, that's true, but when a administrator of a correctional facility figures his budget, he's figuring his budget on what his capacity is if he was completely full. Right. And then, if you're full, then you've used up all your money. If you're not, then you have money that goes back into the general fund. But this small percentage of money that is going to keep these just prolific offenders that just keep redoing Class A offenses.
Yeah, you're not talking about playing dirty in a basketball game.
Right. It's
how much is your wife's life?
Well,
worth?
Anyone who would say something like that, how much did the young lady in Memphis?
Sure.
How much was that life worth?
Right.
If you're talking about keeping people in prison longer for violent offenders who are doing this thing, so that argument is null.
Right.
In most venues, I would say.
You cannot put a price on public safety.
Sure.
You cannot. You can't. And that's interesting. And I'll let you guys go after this, but that's interesting. related to job skills and getting people out in the public, and local jails have really made an effort to have work release for nonviolent offenders. And, there's many laws around that and who can go, and even felons are eligible. And there's a lot of felons who do work release around that state because, it was, playing patty cake one too many times on the street corner. I don't know, but there's lots of things that qualify people to do this. And what that's doing is actually helping rebuild lives. And it's not some Ponzi scheme where it's like you make $2 an hour and then these profits are over here. They're actually working for corporations, and they're vetted, and they sit in front of a board, or a judge is able to work with them. And you have people who are getting out of jail who have lived that life. I'm living in a cardboard box, but now they have $30,000 that they procured a home, and were able to get their driver's license back while in jail and able to get a vehicle. And all they've done was petty theft their entire life, or done things because they know they can have a roof. And there's more of those people than the really crazy people that are killing people in jails, that live that story, that don't know, that just grew up, doing those things, and they don't know how to get out of the hole. For those nonviolent offenders, we're seeing a lot of progress there, where people are watching out, that are getting skills and proof of that. And I don't know if you all have looked at the numbers. Do you realize there's not many more people in jail or prison than there was in 2012? And we're about the same in Tennessee. And I think that's an indicator that we're doing a lot of good work in the prisons and the jails in Tennessee. But what you guys are doing is covering that gap, that public safety gap that needs to be covered. It was a gap noticed by everyone. Like, how are these people getting out? But I think continuing to move that, and we're 1 million more people in the state, and we have the same population in our jails and prisons. And we're not just throwing people out on the street. Well, maybe most jurisdictions aren't. Going, and no bond, no nothing. And sometimes you run into that. But in general, I think we're doing a better job of bridging these gaps and trying to keep the ones who are dangerous in.
Right.
And getting
helping
those people
that need help.
That's right. And rehabilitating, having the success stories.
Right. And on your work release, people that are getting to go out and work from the county jails, at a factory plant, even mechanic, what a lot of the citizens don't realize is the salary they're making is getting paid to the county. They're paying all their court costs, their fines and all. And then they're still
pocketing 70% of the money, and they're paying back fines, fees,
right,
child support. I mean, think about how many you're keeping out of jail because of child support, because they put you in jail because you're in arrears. And what are you doing while you're in jail? Getting more arrears.
Exactly.
And they're changing lives. They're changing people's perspective on, I'll never get out of this cycle of going back and forth to jail. And you're actually creating, and it's the nonviolent offenders who just, they're just knuckleheads that finally needed a chance in life because they grew up with, I'm not making excuses for them, but, mom and dad were drug addicts and they were on the street at 14 and they don't know a different life. Well, it's our job sometimes to show them that. Now the decision is theirs. Mm-hmm. But, sometimes it is providing those opportunities. And the beauty of a work release program is it basically pays for itself. And if you're vetting the right people, there's always going to be people, even though on paper they're nonviolent, but they'll be out back smoking some weed with somebody at work, and got to pull them off of there. That's public safety, it's public trust positions, right? But we've got to take a different approach on that. When solutions already exist, we just have to attack them better and cover the gaps, because everything can't be take a sledgehammer and knock everything down.
And you have to realize you got the 100%ers in the life without paroles, but I'd say, I don't know the numbers, I bet you 95% of inmates are going to be released at some point in time.
In that community.
Yeah.
And with local jails especially.
Into that community. And I mean, yeah, to me, that's the greatest success, to see it. And what our board does, and I think a way to look at it is, you want people to change their lives, through faith and education or however you get there. And the ones that absolutely refuse, we need to protect the public from them. They're predators, and 100%. They need to be looked at as predators. And because, I think sometimes the politicians, the ones that don't care, they're living behind the gated communities, or they're in the nice places, parts of town. You know what I'm saying? I mean, that really is the truth.
Yeah. No,
a lot of the ones that they're not coming to your neighborhood. You know what I'm saying? It's we have this idea that, you know, the poor communities are clamoring. They want them off the streets. They don't want them shooting their children and robbing them. You know what I'm saying? It's usually the ivory tower elites, politicians.
Like kids go to private school, they can pay for the security guards.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, you go and there's a gate in front of them, or they have personal protection or whatever. It's usually those kind of people.
It's a double standard.
Yeah, it is.
You know, it's the Marie Antoinette thing, you know, like let them eat cake, right?
Yeah, I've got 3 bodyguards, and the rest of you slubs don't, you know, you figure it out.
Yeah, no, I get it. But a lot of times that's where forums like this work, because if somebody wants to get on and argue the point, where you've got people who are faced with the things every day and you're making decisions that ultimately are affecting people's lives, but they think those people who are antagonists to this think you're affecting the life of a person who's in prison. No, what you're doing is affecting the life of the victims who are out there going, thank God they're acting a fool in prison and they're not getting out early because of good behavior. We've gotten as a society sometimes to flip those things on its head. And what you all are doing is performing a larger public service than they could ever fathom, because y'all know that y'all don't take those decisions lightly.
Right.
And I see the deliberation that you all put into these things and look into them and say, you know what? No, you're not getting out.
And we can't measure it. I told that the last thing I'll say, because Mike's going to get on to me. I promise you.
My next question is any parting?
This is the parting gift.
Cut his mic after
and
this.
What we do, there's not a measurement for it. You know what there's no crystal ball saying by the inmate advisory keeping that inmate in, he was not there to rob that store and shoot that clerk. So, but we know that it's happening, right? You know, over the years, someone that would have gotten out that would have hurt someone. It's
inevitable.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, that's happening right now as we speak. So anyway, that's all I've got.
No, that's a great point. Does anyone have any parting comments? I want to thank you all for being here today.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
And I look forward to collaboration. I look forward to working through some things the next couple of days. And, you know, if you all want to do this again and talk about successes or initiatives, then hey, we're all about it, you know, and helping each other is you know, brother state entities or sister state entities, however you want to call it. We love to collaborate, work together with many state entities, and it's great having relationships. And, you know, ultimately we're all fighting the same fight, just from different angles. So, all right.
Well, thank you for having us.
Absolutely. Thank you, gentlemen.